Welcome back to Court TV and our continuing coverage of the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. The jury is on a lunch break. What you just witnessed there was what was happening outside of the Hennepin County Government Center. Our cameras are in the inside. And this morning, we witnessed the opening statements from both sides. And the first witness took the stand for the state. This is a trial that is expected to go 3 to 4 weeks long. And you'll see it all right here on Court TV. Joining me now is Court TV anchors. They are with me to discuss what has happened in our daily sidebar. Chanley Painter is live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Julie Grant and Michael Ayala also with us. Well, let's talk about the openings. There's lots to talk about. We'll go around the horn. Chanley, to you first. The state really did have a longer opening and an opening that used not only video but other demonstrative aids to articulate timelines and where they're going with this case.
And that was effective inside the courtroom. We have pool reporters inside the courtroom. They send out notes, and they're telling us in these notes that the jurors are paying attention. They have notepads. They take note of key things throughout both the prosecution and the defense opening statement. And so they're paying attention, and so were we. Big themes for the prosecution hit on. When he started about what the badge says that Chauvin wore over his heart every day about compassion and sanctity of life, and that he betrayed his badge. That seemed to be effective. And then he moved into the use of force argument, what was protocol for officers. Then he moved into the topic of cause of death and what the experts will tell this jury, and tied it up with the bow, saying here's what he's charged with and here's what we'll prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It took about an hour to do, but it didn't really seem to me like an hour long because I was engrossed in all of it.
Julie Grant, the state also said don't let up, doesn't let up, does not get up, meaning that Derek Chauvin didn't let up, didn't get up. And he talked about that betrayal of the badge did Jerry Blackwell. What stood out to you to the state's opening and Jerry Blackwell's performance this morning?
Sure, Ted. So a couple things that stood out to me. Yes, to me, it seemed to me he was trying to convey a theme of betrayal. He started with the betrayal of the badge, and it seemed like when he was talking about how there's going to be a commander who's going to testify that Derek Chauvin knew how to do CPR, but chose not to do CPR, even when those bystanders were begging for them to help George Floyd, and he refused. And so to me, I almost would have liked to have heard him say the word betrayal again there, because I felt like, okay, this is where he's thematically going with it. I liked that he talked about how he put the seed in the jury's mind, planting that seed about how he equated custody with care, saying, in your custody is in your care. And I'm quoting directly from his open, and that's, he said, the motto that these officers were serving with. So I thought that that was great, because we know that what happened in his custody is what's going to be critical to this case and whether or not that force was excessive. And I thought that announcing that the time was 9:29 was huge, Ted. We know that time is going to be a big part of this, and the fact that he extended it, the state in their research and investigation of this found that it was far longer than the 8 minutes 46 seconds that was first believed to be the time George Floyd was held there. So I think overall the state did an excellent job, especially using that technology to further captivate the jury.
Michael Ayala, your thoughts on the state?
Yeah, I thought they kept the focus where it needed to be. It was that, that 9 minutes and 25 seconds. They pegged it at that. Of course, the previous number was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. They take it even another 40 seconds more, so 9 minutes and 25 seconds. He focused on that. I think that was the best way to go. One of the other things that jumped out at me was the sort of methodical nature of the opening. Didn't really show a tremendous amount of emotion, but I think the emotion is in the video. And by showing that video, I think that spoke volumes. And I think he let it do the talking, which I think was really a good way to go in that situation. The other thing was, I had been wondering, again, I asked a number of my guests on my show, how were they going to get to intent? And he was very clear. He said excessive force is an assault. And there it is right there. If he can get this jury to the fact that there was excessive force used, then he can get to the assault, which gets you to the second-degree murder. And I think all those things were laid out very clearly for this jury.
He said that intent would be throughout, sprinkled throughout the case, and you're not going to get it in a sandwich board. Here's intent. It's there. And he told the jury to watch for it throughout the entire case. He also, you bring up emotion, talked about the bystanders. We all know there was plenty of emotion exuded from those bystanders, and they'll see that in the body camera. Let's listen to Jerry Blackwell talking about those bystanders.
But you will see that what they all had in common as they were going about their business is that they saw something that was shocking to them, that was disturbing to them, and it made them stop and take note. Stop and take note. They tried to first, you will learn when you meet them, to intercede on what was happening with their voices. They tried to interject, to exhort, to please stop, to try to get into what we call good trouble just with their voices, because something there was concerning to them. And when that didn't work, you can see any number of them pulled out their cameras to document what was happening, such that it would be memorialized, such that it would not be misrepresented, such that it could not be forgotten.
Call them a bouquet of humanity. I love that line, and told the jury to watch out for them, and they'll be an important part of this case. On the other side, Chanley, Eric Nelson, no demonstrative aids, much shorter opening, but also a theme. It's reasonable and common sense was his theme, and he was able to break down the different spots where all of the investigation would lead. There are only 4 locations, and each one of these things will be put into those locations: the cup foods, the squad car, the Mercedes-Benz of George Floyd, and the hospital. This was a much different opening than we saw from the state, but arguably effective.
Right. He kept it short and simple and started by calling out the massive amount of evidence in this case. He says that there's more than just the 9 minutes and 29 seconds that you heard about from the prosecution. There are thousands of pages and hundreds of witnesses, and we're going to go through all of it. He actually starts with the use of force, just kind of like the prosecution does in the opening statement. He goes towards the use of force by pointing out what happened step by step on Memorial Day of 2020. And he even points out the behaviors the clerk, we're going to hear from the clerk who called 911 at the Cup Foods, and the behaviors the clerk observed of George Floyd, sort of building the picture up to the behaviors, the resisting allegedly of George Floyd, pointing that out for this jury, that he wasn't upfront about he had stuff in his system. After going step by step through that, he said, look, there were even efforts to save George Floyd by the officers. They upped from code 2 to code 3 of the ambulance. He walked the jury through all of that, and then he hit on the second theme of his opening, which was cause of death. He highlighted what the state's county medical examiner will say and pointed out that there's no finding of positional or mechanical asphyxiation in the Dr. Baker autopsy report. And he outlines what his expert is going to tell the jury and points to other causes in the knee, on the neck.
Julie, drugs also a main part of his theme. Effective?
Yes, and I think he could have been more effective, Ted. In terms of energy and delivery, and I'm talking strictly energy and delivery, not content, I was pretty underwhelmed by both attorneys. Eric Nelson especially, and he looked a little tired to me this morning, understandably so. This has been exhausting, and he's been going at it without much help. And I felt like when you start out your open by talking about reasonable doubt, that's a really, really weak way to open up to a jury. And I think that there is such a big story to be told about the fentanyl. There is a lethal dose of fentanyl found in George Floyd's system, and the state's own medical examiner said if he was found at home without knowing any other factors, this would be acceptable to call it an overdose death. And so while I think it was conveyed, it could have been conveyed more powerfully and earlier in the open, Ted.
Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree with Julie. I thought the start there, focusing on the reasonableness, again, when you don't have the facts, you go to that, and I just thought it was a weak way to start. I agree the energy was a little low there, but I think it's a tough spot for a defense attorney because you're in a difficult position, and I think the energy has to be right. You can't be too overzealous, but you also can't be too sort of low-key, and I thought he was trying to find that middle ground, not sure he found it.
Okay, very difficult position to be in. Let's face it, the world was watching, and nobody got a lot of sleep, I'm sure, over the weekend. Thank you all.